In the know, nonstop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com. Purple Daily, presented by Surly Brewing Company.
Those throws are a little bit harder to come by. He's an incredible player, really cerebral. He's one of the first phone calls I made. And one of the funny things I love about being in this job is you come in with a preconceived notion about NFL players. And then you get here and they're just so different than you. I mean, they're all just so talented. You know, I text all my Wall Street buddies all the time, like they would all take our jobs, just so we're clear. And so Kirk is no different, just incredibly talented, smart, detailed. The level of detail of things we talked about was incredible. I won't share that with you guys, but you know, he's an incredible person. I'm excited to work with him.
And yes, with that, welcome into today's edition of Purple Daily, day one from the Combine. That, of course, was Vikings GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah speaking at the podium. He then also did a side session with the beat reporters for the Vikings at the Combine in Indianapolis. Purple Daily is always brought to you by our friends at Surly Brewing and also TCL. Enjoy more with a TCL TV. In fact, right now, if you want, you could watch a coverage of the National Football League Combine on a TCL TV, and you'll get the perfect picture. Zolgad and Declan Goff, there is one familiar face missing. Phil Mackey is out for the remainder of the week, but that does not mean we will slow down. That does not mean we will stop the reckless speculation or discussions. And we certainly got some interesting stuff so far as we record this at approximately 2:30 from the Combine, including one of the quotes that you just heard of Adofo-Mensah talking about Kirk Cousins. He was asked about Kirk Cousins. He was asked about a lot of philosophical stuff when it comes to the roster construction. Also asked about Danielle Hunter. We'll get to that in a while. But Declan, I want to start off with the Kirk Cousins answer that you just played. I give Kwesi a lot of credit. He is a much more engaging human being than Rick Spielman was. He is a much smarter guy. He is, I would say he is a very smart guy. That being said, he clearly showed today, at least at the podium session, that he has a way with words, and that is to, when asked about particulars and specifics, to really do a good job of constructing an answer that's not going to pin him down. It's not going to make him accountable. And in saying that the majority of players in the National Football League, or a good portion of them, are smarter or are more driven than his Wall Street friends, probably not entirely true, but it sounded good. But let's get to this, because in the side session, and you found this quote from Chad Graff of The Athletic, in the side session that Adofo-Mensah did after he got off the podium, he was asked more, of course, about Kirk. And he said, everything is in play. But then also said he expects Cousins to play well with the Vikings this season. The more I hear Kwesi talk, and of course, to go back about a week now, when O'Connell appeared on CCO radio with Chad Hartman, the more I contend that the Vikings, while not intent on trying to move away from Kirk Dex, are very much, as I believe one executive said today, open for business. So, like, to me, it's very clear that they're listening. It's very clear that they're engaged. But we have really seen them both sort of start to distance themselves from Kirk Cousins is definitely our guy. And they've transitioned to, oh, yeah, I mean, he could play for us, but I'm not going to take any potential scenario off the table.
I think they've said everything they're supposed to say. I don't think they've said anything incriminating. I don't think they've said anything that is fully ironclad that he's their quarterback. Yes, he's under contract. That's obvious. They inherited that. They didn't sign into that contract. They inherited that. It's more of figuring out what they want to do with the salary cap, which is something else that I think Kwesi has been saying and talking a lot about at the NFL Combine and in the brief media sessions he's had leading up to this as well. So he hasn't said anything particular. But I did find his press conference to be very thoughtful and very just conversational. The way he, as you said off the top, the way he speaks about things and I can understand why he got this job. From a guy who has a Wall Street background and is an analytical nerd and is someone who is a lot smarter than Judd Zulgad and Declan Goff look and sound, he is able to take these complicated football terms, as I play that sounder, take these complicated football terms and translate them into real life situations, which honestly make them sound completely similar and like kind of open your eyes like, oh yeah, I didn't really think of it like that. I think football is a very complicated sport to understand, dude. There's a bunch of things that are happening on every single play calling, checking at the line, QB cadence, all these things, right? And the way Kwesi talks about it, my God, you should just like write a book. I could listen to him to make these analogies all day long. So back to your point though about Kirk. I think him and Kevin O'Connell are doing everything they can to listen to the right offers. But I'm curious because I think these next few weeks, obviously it's March 1st right now, between now and when the league year starts, this is when we're going to probably see the most activity start to happen.
Absolutely. And these two guys are going to do a great job of being the anti-Rick and Mike. Well, like, make no mistake, they are going to do, they were hired in part because the Wilfs wanted people who were totally different and were more accessible and seemed nicer. Like, that was really it. So both Kwesi and Kevin are going to do a great job of like being, hey, I got to talk about this. This is great. I love football. I love everything. The question becomes this, and this is why I keep telling Phil I'm in wait and see mode. What you say and what you do need to be different often. And it's sports, and that's absolutely fine. But I mean, you can explain to me, I mean, that quote off the top that you played about Wall Street guys is complete BS. Wall Street sharks? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding? Put Kirk Cousins on Wall Street and that dude would melt in one day. Like, those guys. And look, there are football people who would excel there. But like, this notion that they're all so talented. No, they're not. Some of them are, some aren't. Some are talented people athletically, but they lack the intestinal and mental fortitude. So again, I'm being very careful here to say, okay, you can say the fact that you are going to be a nicer guy and more accessible is awesome. But let's see exactly what you do. Now, here's what I think Kwesi and Kevin are going to, if they do go into 2022 with Kirk, what they're going to run into. So Kwesi, I say Z at times, Kwesi, S-E-E or C, said on Kirk, when the odds are shifted in his favor, he gets the most out of it. And then he was asked about that again and said, I think that we can do that. And that's what he's relying on O'Connell to do. Now, okay, that's a fine thing to think, but it's not true, because in the most strenuous times in playoff games against good teams, a coach can only do so much to, and this goes back to my comp for a long time with Kirk, to puppet master his quarterback. Like, Kirk is literally on a puppet string. And if things are going fine, the puppet string works great and Kirk can make plays. But the deeper you get into a season and the more the pressure turns up, Kevin O'Connell can't go out there and play. If you could take Kevin O'Connell's brain and put it in Kirk's brain, you'd have a great QB, because Kevin was held back as a quarterback by his deficiencies physically, and Kirk is held back by his deficiencies mentally. But the reality that they're faced with, and I'm going to give both of them the benefit of the doubt and say they know this, but you can't come out and say it. The reality they're faced with is there's only so much that can be done to puppet master a quarterback deep into a season. So like, you can win games for sure, and you can probably get to the playoffs. And then at some point in time, you're going to have a hellacious tough game, and the quarterback's butt is going to be being kicked and things are going to break down. And at that point in time, the quarterback has to do it by himself.
Yep.
But again, Kwesi's answering questions and he's doing a great job. And I agree. He sounds like a nice guy. And I think as far as his geek side goes, he's probably brilliant. But guess what? Derek Falvey did some really good stuff too and answered some really good questions, and he still has not found pitching. So like, that's my whole, and I am willing to wait, and I am willing to be patient. And as we discussed before, I think 2022 is all about patience. That being said, the delivery is only going to be seen by the actual actions of Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell.
Speaking of his comparisons and just the way he talks about Kirk being scripted in the right times, and yeah, he does well in maximizing those situations. He also made this great comparison that he got advice from, and I'll play the clip here, when when discussing quarterback play, you got to play like Superman and Clark Kent. And I'll play the clip here and then I'll give my take.
I wouldn't say so infrequently. Kevin might disagree with you on that one, but look, I think one of the best things I was ever taught by Gary Cobb. He grew up in my area, and he talked about quarterback needing to know when to be Superman and when to be Clark Kent. And so a lot of times you can actually be bad, being too much Superman, right? So it's not just what happens when the play breaks down, but your ability to get us to the next down. As a quarterback, you hold all of our hopes, our dreams, our livelihoods with the ball. And so we want somebody to take that risk, but also understand the importance of taking smart decisions. So it's just combining all that together and figuring out what gets you the best way forward.
All right, let me use my nerd analogy here. Number one, Kirk Cousins is too much like Clark Kent and is not enough like Superman. He's too much being the Clark Kent and too afraid to step in the shoes of being, and the cape, for the lack of better words, of being Superman. Correct. That's who Kirk is. Kirk is Clark Kent to a degree. If Clark Kent did not have the superpowers that is Superman, that's Kirk Cousins. You might make a case that it's the same guy. And I understand what Kwesi's saying. You can't be too reckless, right? Like, you can't just be throwing balls away and trying to make the home run and be the hero every single time. But Kirk, I don't think, has any DNA in him that suggests he is a Superman. He made a Superman throw to Adam Thielen. I give him props for that.
Right.
But when it's 2018, I'll go back to his first year here. When it's 2018 and all Superman Clark Kent has to do is beat the second string Chicago Bears, and he can't even rise up in that situation, those are the kind of things that I think fans have a negative perception of Kirk. Is, yes, he has great volume stats and on a 30,000 foot view, but he does not. He lacks that Superman gene that separate the other quarterbacks from him.
And I think what O'Connell knows and doesn't want to talk about, or doesn't know yet, but will soon, is this. This would be like if Clark Kent had to be told when to save the day and put the cape on. Yeah. That's the problem. Like, he would literally have to tell Kirk, I need you to throw what could be a very dumb pass right now. Kirk's incapable of that. He can't do that. He can't bring himself. He is so focused on taking a rock from his collection. He is so adverse to risk that I don't think that you can get that Matthew Stafford, okay, bleep it, let's take a shot. We got to take a shot. I don't know that Kirk can bring himself to do that unless you strip away his security blankets completely and allow him to sink or swim where he literally becomes just out of body. Which would mean Thielen's gone. Like, you would have to say, you can't throw to him because he's on the Patriots now. Too bad. You're throwing to Justin Jefferson no matter what on this play, and it might get picked. But here's the problem with that. So that sounds great. Okay, Judd, yeah, just call for that. Who cares, right? Thielen's gone. Then who cares? Don't forget, the interception in San Francisco ruined a season. So what you're talking about now is, let's get to a key game. And O'Connell says, Kirk, it's time to put that damn cape on, buddy boy. We are calling this elaborate football play, and there is risk everywhere. Like, this is sink or swim. This is live or die. And you might screw up, but if you don't, it's a big play. And Kirk does it. And Kirk throws a pick. Guess who's lost for the rest of that game? Kirk Cousins. And that's the problem. And that's what these guys either know and aren't discussing, which I don't blame them one bit. I would not talk about that publicly. There's no sense in that. Or they're going to find out. Because, I mean, I can't tell you. Go back and watch him after that pick against San Fran. He was a shell of himself. He was done. He was completely rattled. He was completely out of sorts. And he's a quarterback. I mean, dude, it's going to happen. It's a bad pick. Who cares? Like, Matthew Stafford, for all his faults, guess what he did? He consistently screwed up at times, and he just came back and played the position. So, like, the Superman thing's a great comparison, but the one thing is, and I've only seen about 2 of the films. I'm sure that you've seen them all, Dex. The comparison problem is this. In the movies, Clark Kent knew when to go into the phone booth. Kirk Cousins is going to have to be dragged by his hair into the phone booth and be told, put the damn cape on, Kirk. So all of these things, but I do find it very intriguing that at least in what Adofo-Mensah said today, I found that there was that there was an interesting level of non-commitment to, oh yeah, we're looking forward to Kirk, but nobody pounded the table wisely and said, this is our guy. Stop asking me the question.
Yeah. And I just, that's what I want to see what Kwesi and KOC want to do with Kirk Cousins' future. Because if what we talked about on a previous Purple Daily episode is if Kirk's willing to play ball with his contract and wants to negotiate down his money, okay. Honestly, I can sign up for that. If Kirk wanted to have a modest middle tier, maybe a little bit above mid-tier contract, I can get down with that idea. The problem is he's yet to show any faith of that. Now, if he comes out, let's play a hypothetical game. Little reckless speculation here, okay?
Reckless speculation.
By the way, hit the subscribe button if this is the first time you're discovered Purple Daily. We are a daily Minnesota sports podcast. Mackie Judd, I am Declan Goff. Hit the subscribe button right here in this YouTube channel, Daily Minnesota Vikings Entertainment. Let's say Kirk Cousins in a week says, you know what? All right, KOC, Kwesi, you're right. I have made $150 million in my career. Let's smooth out this $45 million cap hit. Let's make it, I don't know, Judd, let's call it 2 years, $50 million.
Mm-hmm.
So 25 per.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that 45 mil probably gets, extended out into signing bonuses and other math gymnastics that I'm not going to get into. But if he's willing to say, all right, I want to help build out this roster. I only have a few years left here. I'm 34 years old. I'm probably going to be over the hill here. I won't be playing quarterback for 10 more years after playing it for the last 8 or so. I want to do this kind of extension. Personally, I'd be, okay, let's do that. Let's do that. And that's someone who I'm curious what they want to do with the long-term future of this team. But if Kirk Cousins was willing to go up and say that, I would sign up for that. The problem is he has yet to ever show or say or commit to wanting to do that to help his team.
All indications at this point as well, to be clear, are that the Vikings have had some type of informal or preliminary discussions, and that the Cousins camp has been very clear, we will not take a pay cut. They have been very clear. We want an extension. We will not take a pay cut. And in fact, we want an extension that will begin in 2023 and be commensurate with what the salary cap is going to be, which means that he's actually asking for a starting point of $40 million next season, or in 23 next year. So I think he'd be willing to take some of the cap hit of $45 million that he's due for 22 and move that a little bit, but he wants more money. So there's been no indication. And I do believe that the Cousins camp, and he is his agent is a guy by the name of Mike McCartney. Mike McCartney, I think, is supposed to meet with the Vikings this week. And so we should at some point in time get, I would guess, some leaks at least, because I highly doubt the Vikings are going to come out and discuss this, but we should get some leaks from Indianapolis on the tenor of those discussions. But as of right now, yeah, I mean, this all, as I continue to say, this all comes down to his contract. Dex, you're right. If he came and said, you know what, I've broken the bank, I'm cool, get me a guard, let's get some pieces here. But that would not be him. That's the problem. We want a different person. You want a guy with his arm talent, not his brain, and we want a different person here. And you're not going to get that. And I think the one question is, can Kevin O'Connell and his litany of quarterback coaches help Kirk Cousins achieve more? And the answer, in my opinion, is probably not, because we saw him in Washington. He had LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan, hell, he had O'Connell. So he had all of these great coaches, and he was still Kirk. So yeah, I don't think it's going to change. If they insist on beating their heads against the wall and taking him through 2022, they can do that. If they give him an extension, I think they're completely crazy. Because they're going to find out in the midst of that extension exactly what we're telling them right now. It's one thing if you can say, oh yeah, those people were right, so we're going to cut bait after 22. It's another if you said, oh, whoops, those people were right, and we're committed to this guy for X amount of years.
I have another quote here from Kwesi Adofo-Mensah that I'll read you here, Judd. But when you don't take any pay cuts when it comes to your Surly beer options, because there is no real restructures. There's only extensions. There's only more beers that you have to offer. You have the Surly Furious, but then there's even more variety packs out there that you can dabble into.
I'm glad you brought this up because right now we are in the midst of the greatest season of all. Not winter, not even spring coming. We are in Surly Variety Pack season, the first one of 2022. Index, to your point, Furious is great. My official beer. I love it.
Yep, your QB1.
Havoc Machine is great. Ghost Empire Dark Lager, also incredibly solid. But then let me tell you about my new favorite child, the hyper modern Idaho 7 IPA, which Declan Goff, who I don't think is like Mr. Beer,
I like beer, but
has imbibed in and also finds it delicious. So if you're trying to think to yourself, I like Furious, but I'd like some variety, some spice of life, check out the first Surly Variety Pack of 2022. And then, as always, show us your cans. I am at JZulgad, JZULGAD on Twitter. I'll get back to you with a pithy comment because I love to see Purple Daily fans enjoying a good variety pack from Surly.
Show us your cans and show us your taps. All right. Kwesi also went talked about the poor perception of this year's draft class among quarterbacks. Vikings quarterback GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah noted that the class with Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson was also looked at from a negative perspective. And then eventually, obviously, those two quarterbacks ended up being studs. I know Deshaun Watson's in a little bit of legal limbo right now, but that's a good point. I know that Malik Willis, Kenny Pickett, Matt Corral, this isn't a surefire stud that's probably going to go in the top 5 or be a franchise-altering quarterback. But odds are one of these guys going to potentially be a franchise-changing quarterback? Yeah, they probably will be. So if they wanted to do that, we did a mock draft episode on Mackey and Judd, which you can find. There's 2 different mocks. The Mel Kiper, who mocked a cornerback going to the Vikings, and then also PFF Steve from Pro Football Focus mocked Malik Willis. So a lot can change, I think, between now and the draft and whatnot. And if the Vikings feel the need that they could take a quarterback at 12 or whatever pick that may be, I think they will explore those options.
So I'm going to give them on Kirk. I will say my mind is, for the most part, on Kirk made up, and I don't think that they can change him. On the quarterback thing, I will completely defer to them. Like if they say, hey, you know what? You guys are full of bleep. This quarterback class is fantastic. I'll say, oh, okay, cool. Draft one. That's awesome. And if they come back and say 2023 is probably our year to draft a quarterback, 2022 is not strong, I'd say that's fine too. I think we know what we know about the current personnel and current roster. I think we also have to have faith, more importantly than Kwesi being a nice guy and O'Connell being accommodating. The most important thing is this: can you find a damn quarterback? Like that's my question. Like you can call me a you know what? I don't care. Like if you're nice, that's cool. If you're not nice, I don't, but can you find? Rick and Mike didn't get fired because they weren't accommodating. It didn't help them at the end, but they got fired in large part because they couldn't find a quarterback. And so I think the question now becomes, can you find one? So if they're really thinking, hey, this quarterback class, this has got some talent, go for it. And if you're not, that's fine too. But ultimately, as smart as Kwesi might be, and as well spoken, and as nice and charming at the microphone as O'Connell might be, the reality is all Vikings fans really care about is, can you identify the most important position in sports? And if you can, guess what? You're going to win games. Let's play Kwesi's clip on Danielle Hunter as well, because if Kirk is probably storyline 1A and 1B, this is definitely probably storyline 2 at the Combine.
Is he also part of your long-term plans?
Danielle was actually one of the first people I spoke with. Really good player, incredible person. We were talking about traveling. Again, one of those things you love about NFL relationships. He was traveling somewhere that I had been, and we caught up about that. But he is, he's a really good football player, and to build championship teams, you need a lot of really good football players. So, he's somebody that we continue want to work with going forward, and we're just kind of excited to talk through all our possibilities with that.
Work with means contractually. Doesn't mean one thing about him playing. Second of all, let's before we talk about Danielle, let's break down the answer because I want to talk about the answer.
Okay.
The answer is genius. Okay, first of all, being personable is smart because you can go in different paths. So if you're just a bleep hole, right? Like if you're just Mr. Football guy and you don't really have the latitude, right, to take the conversation and start talking about travel. Taking that to travel, we talked about travel, is genius. Absolutely genius. Because he's establishing that he and Danielle had a conversation, but then he sort of gets away from the actual information that we want, which is what happened football wise, and he takes it to travel. That, my man, that is a smart dude. But as far as that goes, so I'm guessing that the Vikings are going to meet with a bunch of the agents for players. Certainly Kirk's guy, Danielle's guy. And I think I think Danielle is staying put unless he says, I want out. So Dex, my guess on him is he either agrees or he either basically is given a restructured contract, which as we talked about with Phil on the Purple Daily that was posted earlier today, will allow them to turn the roster bonus into a signing bonus and spread that out. Or the flip side is he just flat out gets a new contract. Now, the question there is not, is this guy good? He's a Pro Bowl player. I believe in the last 2 seasons in which he was healthy, he had 14 and a half sacks each of those years. He's a great player. Question is more this: can he play? He had the herniated disc surgery with a problem in his neck in 2020. He didn't play it down in that season. And then in 2021, he played in 7 games and got hurt. So I think that's going to be more the judgment of any potential concern. But I gotta say, I think the odds right now of Danielle Hunter being back here are actually greater than Kirk. And my sense is about Kirk is I think that their options are open there. But if I was to handicap the guys that we've talked about possibly being gone, I think Danielle is probably back.
I think he's back too. I don't see a situation where they just absolutely cut him or want to move on from him. I think it'd be pretty foolish to do that. Also, that would change your draft plans dramatically. If they moved on from Danielle Hunter, I think you can make a case defensive end might jump cornerback as the most important thing to find. And this draft is loaded with both those positions. But if they cut Danielle Hunter, that creates a new problem for them. So I think they'll figure out Danielle's situation. They went back to him last year, but at the same time, they have to keep him healthy. If the Vikings can't defend the pass, can they get after the quarterback at an elite rate? And I think that's kind of my mindset of wanting to keep Danielle Hunter here. He's an integral part of this defense, even if he's only played 7 games the last 2 years. On our Vikings Vent Line episode last week, we had Alex. Alex came on, who was a doctor, and he went back and reviewed 30 peer-reviewed journals. He's a foot doctor, but he reviewed 30 peer-reviewed journals on the pectoral injury. Okay, the pectoral injury that Danielle had.
That's what Dumba had, right? A couple of years ago.
Yeah, and I think Matt Dumba also had it. So the same pectoral injury that Danielle Hunter also had. Okay. And I think what his finding was there was only like a 2% case study, like a small fraction where that surgery ended up not helping the person in the long run. So that surgery is not necessarily a concerning one that has a limited ability that's going to limit him or force him not to come back. I highly recommend checking it out. He's a lot smarter than me. Thank God we have doctors that actually come on this show, Judd Zolgad, to explain that stuff.
What was the estimated recovery time? Because in Dumba's case, it impacted him for a year. Like that was the problem. He is fine now, but the problem was then he got in that fight with Kachuk at the X, missed I think the rest of that season, and then played Dex the next half of the following year and still didn't have it. My concern was the amount of just flat out time it took him to get back. He finally did get back, but it wasn't I rehabbed it. I started playing and I'm fine. It was actually a drawn out process.
Yeah, I don't remember if he said the timetable, but he just said that the length of successful and unsuccessful surgery was extremely small. So as in he should be able to come back on time. And you know what? To prove that Danielle came back from a neck injury, which was pretty significant, and showed that he was damn good too in 2021, I think shows that he is a freak of nature athlete and will do all the rehabilitation takes that he needs to get back on the field. And I wouldn't be too concerned about it if I was a Vikings fan.
Gotcha. All right, sir, we are done. Back tomorrow. Write that down, of course, on the flagship show, Mackie and Judd, and also, of course, on Purple Daily. Appreciate all of you who tuned in live. And don't forget to drink your Surly. That's right. First Surly variety pack is here. He's Declan. I'm Judd. We'll talk to you later.